The clips that I often show in my videos are taken in Half Moon Bay, California, a small farming community with many immigrant and potentially undocumented populations. I love this town. My family has lived here, some for 30 years, some for close to a decade, and I visited it a lot. I'm really upset. I'm really angry that this happened. I'm really angry that there's just a lot of people who will never be okay for so many different reasons. And I'm scared that eventually many of us will not have to wonder what it is like to be close to an event like this. I'm going to include some links below to help, support comprehensive gun legislation, if you could take a look. Thank you. Hi, everyone. So I am finally ready to do my 2022 year in review of all the books and reviewing, and we're reviewing the books. Okay, so I was able to read 59 books in 2022, a combination of audiobooks and physical books. Definitely still more physical books were read. And that's mostly because I prefer audiobooks for two reasons. First of all, if it's nonfiction, to me, I actually really enjoy podcasts, but I like the really well scripted podcasts where they're telling you a story, and maybe interviewing people along with it. I can do, a dollop style podcast, but I prefer the really scripted ones that are kind of just like a documentary that you listen to. So that's how I prefer to read nonfiction, because it kind of gives me that energy of a podcast. But the other reason that I listen to stuff on audiobook is if it's a book that I am doing through my book club. A lot of those ones I'm not personally selecting, which is fine. It's just I don't necessarily want to then purchase a book that maybe I'm not immediately drawn to. And also because there's deadlines there, I can listen to an audiobook and complete other tasks versus if it's just a book I'm reading for me, I don't have a personal deadline for that. Maybe I'm making one up, but it's not. No one else is kind of expecting me to have finished that. An audiobook, yeah, if I'm just doing whatever I need to be doing, I can be listening. And then the other reason is I got the Libby app recently, and I'm kind of taking that as an opportunity to read a bunch of things that I'm finding there that it's I probably would have never picked this book up. I would have never probably purchased this book. But now that I have access to it, I have no problem giving it a little read. So two of those books were The Invisible Man and Journey to the Center of the Earth. Those were two audiobooks that not that I would have never read them, but it would have taken me a longer time to pick up a physical copy. So I just went ahead and listened to them. Now, yeah, if I had, I don't know, I might have already said this. If I had read all of these physical, it would have been around 45 pages a day. And I do not necessarily note in the app trackers which ones I read audio versus physical. However, to me, I like noting that because it is kind of indicative of the length of book that I'm reading. And rather than tracking that information separately, because I cannot be arsed to do that. Is that offensive to British people if I say that? But I cannot be. So that's just how I'm keeping track of the overall length of, collective length of everything I'm reading. So I read around 17,000 pages last year, but again, some of those were technically hours listened. Okay, but in terms of gender, I had 31 female authors. I feel like women authors. Yeah, women authors. 27 men authors. That's like, female sounds weird, but man authors sounds weird. So it's like women and male. I don't know. Am I confusing myself? Probably. And then I also had one author who I believe identifies as non-binary. Also, I read 29 of these books were translated works, which I do feel not necessarily like, I'm curious about how much it identifies in terms of reading. Like, on one hand, a lot of the books that I read that were written originally in English were significantly tied to non-Western cultures. Like, I think about Hao by Ye Chun that I read, and it's like that book, or that short story collection, is about Chinese women both in China and in the US. It involves and ties language in, and it's not translated, but like, can you really argue like, oh, this is a book that is talking specifically about like some like Western experience? I would argue no. Or I think about Aria by who's it by? Nazanin Hozar. I also think about that book, and it's like, that book has like, it is written, I believe, by a woman who's in Canada. I don't know if she's, I don't know how she, like, Iranian Canadian. Is that book, it's not translated, but how does it fit into that kind of space of like, the people who this book is writing about do not speak English? So I do think it's like, it's a useful thing to note, but I do think that there is an element of there's an element of like, how do you include also those books which are focused in some way on people who would be speaking another language to you. Again, I feel like, I don't know how important that is. I don't know if that's even interesting to point out. Another thing to point out is that I've read 17 nonfiction books, which is, again, very much aided by the fact that I was able to listen to them on audiobook. But also was, I think, very enjoyable. I think I'm learning to love nonfiction in a way I didn't expect myself to. I think I'm learning what I like and dislike in nonfiction, which is quite informative. Like, I don't think I would have ever pegged myself as someone who enjoys autobiographies or biographies of any sort, but I actually had, I found a couple biographies that I really like. And I found that I really like deep dives into like a particular event, such as 5 Days of Memorial or Into Thin Air, where it's discussing very specific events, but it's discussing before them and then the aftermath of them, and has some kind of ethical questions tied throughout. I really like books like that. So it's really informative, really cool, and very much like they said, like the whole podcast thing, like that's so good. That element of being able to be like informed, but also like washing dishes. Now, I am a part of a book club that was kind of through my former employer. And if you work in like an office space and you have a book club where you want to suggest a book club, I like how it was done in my last work, where they did a book club, but they split it up in between what types of books do you like to read. And one of the options was kind of we would like to read diversely category. And so that's the team book club that I'm on. We call it like the DE&I, or the Inclusivity Book Club. And it is honestly so awesome. And I've read some just amazing books being a part of that. And specifically, the books that I have read were Lucky Breaks by Evgenia Belarusets, The Sum of Us by Heather McGee, Bloodlands by Timothy Schneider, Darius the Great Is Not Okay, and I forgot to write down that author's name, and I don't remember it off the top of my head. Nuclear Family by Joseph Hahn, Parable of a Sower by Octavia Butler, A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers, and The Pretty One by Kia Brown. That was specifically for that like inclusivity book club. And then I read 2 others for other book clubs, one of which is that I actually don't work at that company anymore. I work at a new company now, and they have a book club, but first of all, their book club is like 8 a.m. US time because they're in the UK, and I'm like, I can't do that. And the book that we read is I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou. And for the Financial Diet Book Club, I read Rest is Resistance by Trisha Hershey. So yeah, those are all the book club books that I read. And honestly, if I had to give a star rating to my year of reading, I would say it's a solid 4.5. No, it'd be 4. The reason is because I feel like a lot of books that I read were these books that I would never have chosen myself. Like, I would not have read Darius the Great Is Not Okay. And while I respect and think that's a cute book, it's not for me. The Becky Chambers book, not for me. Nuclear Family, I probably wouldn't have read. And also I read that on an audiobook. I did not like that on audiobook. And there's just a couple of things here and there where it's like, I read a couple of books that I was like, this just is not really my style. I read a lot of books that were absolutely my style. A lot of ones that I really, really loved and enjoyed. But I would say that I want to get maybe a little bit more focused on really focusing on the books I think I'm going to like absolutely love. And I think I do have like kind of a good taste for that, like a good ability to pick out a book that I like. You know, I feel the draw, the magnetic connection. And so yeah, I hope to kind of get back into that. You know, I really want to have a 4.75 year of reading next year. Because, you know, 5 is a lot. That's asking a lot for myself. But I'm going to also give you my top 5 and my bottom 5 books. With the bottom 5 books, because I did generally have a pretty good reading year, most of these are not like 0, don't pick them up books. It's just they weren't books for me, and I'll try to explain why they weren't books for me. So I'm gonna do the bottom ones first. So, and this is vague. There's one that's very much absolutely the worst, and there's these other ones that are kind of like, yeah, you're here. So, The Beekeeper of Aleppo by Christy Lefteri, I don't know. I thought that this was a fine book. It was absolutely fine. But I found it personally, like the twists were just not necessary, and they almost felt childish and juvenile. And I think the same story could have been told without these twists that the author wanted to include. I honestly think it would have been a slightly better story. I think maybe this is a little bit better for a younger person too. I think it is a story that they can enjoy while also maybe still having some more excitement, whereas I'm very much in my like, give me a dark, drawn out, philosophical story. I'm fine with that in a way that I think maybe younger audiences want like a little bit more action, or people who tend to prefer YA, like they want a little bit more action than I'm, you know, needing in my books. Then there's The Invisible Man. I just thought this was absolutely fine. And I kind of thought it'd be more exciting, and it's not that exciting in my opinion. Like the whole time, you know what the thing is, and then you're like, oh no, is he gonna get caught? But obviously he's gonna get caught. And what the twist there is that he's a big asshole of a character, the main guy, and it's like, you could have made him not, like, I feel like he could have been like a little bit more, well, like, he was just an asshole the whole time, and you're like, oh, you could have been not an asshole and become an asshole, but no, you were a dick. And I just thought it was okay, this one, No Longer Human by Osamu Dazai. I've seen it on like everyone's TikTok being like, do you feel you're not like other girls? Are you like depressed and hot? read this book. I find these characters who are like, I feel so different. I'm not like other people. Why am I so weird and different? No one can relate to me. If you can relate to those types of characters, congratulations, this book is for you. I find people like that, I don't know if I find people like that frustrating. I find books like that frustrating, where it's like, I feel like sometimes I'm laughing, but I'm not really laughing. Like, that's everyone. I don't know. Like, I guess I'm not someone who, like, really relates to that struggle of, like, feeling, like, I always feel like, oh no, everyone has my problems, they're ubiquitous. Everyone has these problems. These are very stupid problems. So I don't feel that, like, impending sense of, like, loneliness and alienation from my peers. And if you feel that sense of loneliness and alienation, read this book and maybe you'll feel less alone. It's not a great ending. Honestly, maybe you should read this book. This will not inspire happy thoughts in you. And this is where one of my other books from my top 5 will come in. And I think I've mentioned this before, this other book, and I've mentioned my connection to this. So if you've watched my videos, this might not be a spoiler. Okay, the second one is that book I was mentioning earlier, Aria by Nazanin Hozar. This book is focusing on children, right? It's focusing on a child mostly. She grows up through it, but it's like a lot of it's just focusing on her when she's really young. And I don't love very young characters because I think I just don't care. Like, not that I don't care about children, but it's like I do care greatly about children. But in terms of what I like about reading, it's not necessarily seeing like a child be like, oh my God, what's a president? Not that that was something that a character in the book said, but you know what I mean? Like, kids, oftentimes where they can be very useful figures is in like exploring something or showing how like children can be really naive to X problem. But I think in this book, it didn't seem as insightful. Like the fact that she was a child didn't seem that necessary, if that makes sense. And I think the book was trying to sort of explore this relationship between maternal figures, but I just didn't really enjoy that framing. And I think I not only would have preferred, but I will seek out something that maybe talks about an older character or a already kind of young adult character in the same setting, something that I just will be a little bit more, up my alley. Another example I think of when children can be really good is, for example, in Dairy Girls, how the show is juxtaposing this violent reality that these girls are living in, girls and James, and also how they're young and they still want to have young teenage experiences. And so I think that is cool when there's this intentionality behind it. I'm going to talk about a young person, but the reason why this character is young will give something to the reader that they wouldn't have received if the character was older. Okay, yeah, so that's what I wanted to say about that. The absolute worst book, I made a video about this. It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. This is not good, okay? If you have noticed this and you think you have a similar taste to me, don't read this book. It is not good. It is not good, and I'm very mad. And my friend and I were kind of relating. We did a buddy read on this, and we were relating to the fact that that like every time we see this book, we get angry. Like, I get mad, she wants to vomit. Like, that's our reaction. It's Pavlovian at this point. And I hadn't known anything about Colleen Hoover. Like, this was my first introduction to her as an author, and now I see her everywhere, and I see people talking about her all the time, and it's really funny to me. It's really funny to see now, having that context, because beforehand, like, I had literally no clue, and it's really funny now. And now to my top 5 books. So the last one on this list is actually, like, again, this is sort of there's one that's like a particular order, but in general, Being Mortal is a phenomenal book, and I actually think everyone should read it. I think it helps you navigate your own thoughts of end of life. Like, what do you think? What kind of conversations do you need to have? And it helps navigate the end of life of people you might be experiencing. I am in a space where I think I'm able to sort of handle relatives of mine aging. I've had to kind of deal with that in a bit more of a magnified way in my life recently. And this book has helped me feel comfortable with that in a way I don't think I would have been able to before reading this. I also was able to give someone advice completely based off of what I read in this book, completely informed by that. And I think that person sort of expressed gratitude for that advice. And again, it wasn't from me, it was from the book. And I was like, I'm very glad that I was able to provide that, because I think that was comforting to someone. Yeah, I think healthcare workers, I think if you're getting old, I think if other people are getting old, it talks about a lot of different things, and it covers a lot of different things. And it made me less afraid of, getting old. And I think even the idea of people passing, it helped me with that. Moving on, this is not Propaganda by Peter Pomerantsev. But I'm honestly not sure how to say his last name. This is also nonfiction, and it details, I think, the information age, but also the corruption of that by corrupt political forces, or people who are trying to radicalize you or sow doubt and mistrust and discord. And I think especially with the horrible war with Russia, attacking Ukraine and murdering Ukrainian people, that's what's happening for no reason. I think that this book explains some of the lead up to this. I think it explains how the Russian regime uses information, how it misuses information, how it corrupts information. I think it is a really good background, and then also expands it to other fields. Pomerantsev is a Ukrainian born, I think he's ethnically Ukrainian, but I'm not sure on that. And his family had to flee. I think his dad was either a journalist or a poet, and they had to flee the Soviet Union because of persecution within the Soviet Union. So highly recommend that. And I want to read other stuff by him. Next up, it's the book that I compare to No Longer Human, and that is Confessions of a Mask by Yukio Mishima. This book has what the other book had, what No Longer Human has, except this involves a character who is gay. And therefore, there is actual stakes here. This person saying, I think I'm a little different. You're a little different. There's something about you that it would be not okay if your, traditional, post-war, during and post-war, Japanese society found out about. It probably would not be okay. I'm not exactly sure how they felt about, gay people in that time period in Japan, but I'm assuming it probably wasn't super popular. I feel like probably was not super popular. And in that, I think it it takes all those conversations of who am I normal? What's going on with me? I just have to think differently. I just need to, I need to work around this. All of those thoughts now have stakes and risk. And if something goes wrong, there's consequences there. And that's why it doesn't feel just kind of like a washed up, a wealthy boy being oh, why is my life hard? It's no, that guy's life is actually hard. That character is going through it. And I think it is not only more interesting in that, it's also very well written. I feel I think there's just a little bit more musicality to the writing, and I preferred it. Next on the list is Tomb of Sand by Gitanjali Sri, and my God, very long. It was the longest read I had this year, but it was beautiful. I really recommend this book to anyone who wants a exploration of intergenerational relationships. I think too, like I said, it deals with someone who is getting older, and that is an experience that I have in my life currently. And it was literally you're reading this book and you're also seeing someone, and you're it's actually helping me in a way. There's something about this that feels correct to be reading at this particular point in time, and it is beautifully written. Daisy Rockwell's a translator, Norman Rockwell's granddaughter, I think. And I said this before, you're gonna get to a point like around the 500s where you're like, where's this going? Keep with it, keep going, soldier forth. So amazing. I'm so glad I picked it up. I was in, I think Copenhagen when I picked it up. I saw it and I was like, am I gonna get that? That's big. Snatched. And I'm so glad I did. It was fabulous. It deserved to win. It won the like International Booker Prize or whatever. And it deserved that completely. So good. Also, so my final book, the best book I've read this year, and honestly I think one of my favorite books of all time, I recommend this to everybody who asks me for recommendation, and that is Silence by Shusako Endo. This book is so fabulous. I think it dives deep into the questions of like, what is a good person? What is better to have the arrogance of constantly making the same mistake and yet asking for forgiveness, or the arrogance of I've fallen once and I cannot get up again. I am too proud to get up again. What is better? That is, I think, part of the question. I think this book handles the kind of like Catholicism and Christianity plus colonization, and it's handling it from a Japanese perspective where the author is Japanese Catholic, so he is looking at it, I think, from that critical lens as well. And I think the book just, it asks like the silence of God. You know, what does that mean? What does faith mean? When it is like, and that is always my thing. Like you always see the billboard. I mean, I always see the billboards of like, God's here. Here's proof. Call this number, 1-800 truth, 1-800 love, 1-800 whatever, right? Whatever the freaking numbers are, right? And I always find that ironic because the idea I thought behind God is that you have faith in something you cannot prove. That is why it's faith. If they had proof, it would be faith. Okay. And I think in this case, the book is truly dealing with how do you have faith when God's silence is in front of the absolute, so like the suffering, the like horrible suffering of others, you know? And also, what is worth more? What is worth more? One man's decision to remain by God, or one man's ability to say, I will not let others suffer, and yet I will be remorseful. I don't know. I just think there's so many questions. I freaking need someone else to read this goddamn book because I need to talk about it with someone. I need it to talk about it with someone. But no one's read the book. The movie is also good. If you don't want to read the book, watch the movie. It's Scorsese made it, and it's actually it's clear he respects the book a lot. And Adam Driver and Andrew Garfield and the guy, he was Obi-Wan Kenobi's sensei. Oh my god, who is that? I keep wanting to say Garfield again. It's obviously not Andrew Garfield. He will find Liam Neeson. He will find you and he will kill you. Liam Neeson's in it. Okay, so yeah, he's in it too. So very good movie. So that's been my year. Sorry, this is I tried to make this organized, but it's hard to make this video where it's like, here's some statistics, but also I'm not going to just list every book that I've read. Like, I don't know. It was a good book. It was a good book year, but I want it to be better. I have some goals. I think I'll make a separate video about my goals. I think I need to nail them down. I think I need to really, really spend a hot second to keep up what my goals are. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. I am currently reading Snow Child by Ewan Ivy. Yeah, I haven't touched it really all this weekend, but that's what I'm reading. Thank you, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.